Could your designs be better? If you're new here, my name is Duran and I do a series on this channel where I ask you guys to send in your designs and then I fix them. I've designed official merch for Nirvana, Metallica, Green Day, and more. And everything I learned from those projects, I share with you on this channel and I bring that into these critiques so I can help you level up your designs. But as always, a little preface, I'm no art professor. Okay, I'm just a lover of the game. I love Photoshop. Nothing I'm about to show you is the right way to design. It's just what I would do differently and why. I love and appreciate you guys for trusting me to do this. Let's get into it. These two designs are heading with me to the workshop today. Big thank you to Epic Shadow 00 and Frank Visuals for sending these in. Let's start with this one and see what you did right and what I think you can improve on. Right off the bat, I love that it has a cohesive color palette. There's a really nice subtle grain across everything as well, and that gives it a really nice texture and feel. The clouds and the lightning are extremely interesting. Really cool lighting and shapes going on here for sure. It's even got a bit of an airbrush feel. It's nice and soft. And the general glowiness across the design just really contributes to the mystique and aura coming off of this. And that looks really nice paired with this understated grunge / vintage texture we got going on here, especially in the highlights. Overall, this one's really cool and it's got some super solid elements, but I do think the composition is pretty spaced out, which can be fine, but I feel like for this design in specific, I feel like the negative space just doesn't justify itself well enough. It feels sort of split into 3 boxes, and your eyes really aren't directed towards the right areas, I would say. We definitely want the main focus to be on the main element here, the car, but this big text down here just feels extremely bright and heavy compared to what should be the main element. And so my eyes are directed a little more to here than there. I also think the body text down here is just extremely stiff and just too long. It feels unnatural and estranged from the rest of the design. When we're looking at this from the perspective of what does it tell the viewer, we first want them to see the car looking sick as fuck and pique their interest through this graphic here. Then the main text will inform them sort of what they're looking at, and then the body text is going to give that final added context. I want to keep the lightning and cloud elements for sure. I think they're really cool, but I want to move them around so they create less unnatural shapes in the negative space here, and so that they better follow the contours of the element that they're supporting. I also want to ground this main element, the car. So I want to add some sense of atmosphere by literally grounding it, adding some sort of floor beneath it so that it appears to exist in dimensional space rather than floating in the void. And finally, I think I'm going to change the big type here to something just more legible and more proportionate. This thing looks awesome. Major props to Frank Visuals. Now let's see how I would go about it. Let's get in the weeds. Let's get our hands dirty. I'm starting off by focusing my sights on the main element. So I'm hiding the whole bottom portion here. Let's just focus on the car, which I have 2 issues with. I think it's just a little flat as an element. It looks like you thresholded it, which took away a bit of depth, which isn't a bad thing, but I think this element could benefit from that extra depth in light and shadow. And 2, this is the photo's fault, but I feel like it would just be a better fit if it was more angular. So I'm replacing this with the same photo of the car that I found on Google. And then I'm skewing it a bit to give it more of an angular edge. And that'll help add a sense of movement to the design, which for a car-based graphic really helps sell the idea. And then I want to fix the colors a bit. I love the gradient map as is, but the one thing I want to change is giving a warmer yellow tint to those highlights instead of the cooler off-white we've got going on here. And this contrast between the warm and cool just adds complexity to the color palette, and with color theory in mind, it makes it more appealing to the eyes since purple and yellow are opposite each other on the color wheel. I'm also going to go ahead and remove all the noise you have on the design, not because I hate noise, I love noise, but simply because it was added via layer styles, that little noise slider in layer styles. And I think the noise in layer styles just doesn't look good. It's too harsh and digital looking. So instead, I'm adding a custom noise pattern on top and setting that to overlay. And this just gives it a more natural feel while keeping that noisy, grainy texture. The clouds and lightning are awesome, but I do want to go all in on the airbrush feel, and I'll do that by softening the glow a bit, and I'm going to blur the lightning as well to soften that too. This helps us towards a more airbrushed and just softer aesthetic. I'm also going to flip the clouds horizontally and bring it in towards the car. I think that not only improves the contour of the negative space, but it also adds some aura and chaos, which we want, again, for a sense of movement. Now, I don't want this car to be floating in the void. I want to give it some dimension. So I'm adding a photo of desert landscape beneath it to ground it a bit, and then adjusting that to fit it in perspective. And I'll also add some shadow from the car onto the ground for better depth and realism. Now let's bring back that big type. I'm not a huge fan of this font. It's just a little illegible and really wide, and I want to fit this text onto one line. So I'm going to change the font to Muscle, and I don't mind it being just plain white, but let's have some fun with this and make it chrome. I'm going to use my CHROMETONE action set for this effect, and it's also going to add a horizon to it, which is a neat little interplay with the word skyline. And, you know, I want to have some fun here. I do think that's pretty fun. Now let's bring back that cloudy lightning element from before, and I want to keep it more understated this time. So I'm masking a bit of it out and playing with the opacity. And we also want that body text in there, of course. I just don't want it as long. So I'm going to keep all the more punchy sentences in there. And now I think it's time for some finishing touches. I added a moon up here because I thought it looked cool. And again, atmosphere is very important in design, so this helps set that scene. And maybe we'll throw some sparkles or lens flares here and there for added pizzazz. I'm also going to throw on some vintage texture. This one is from my Worn Plastisol 2 texture kit, which is available on DuranSupply.com, as well as CHROMETONE. I'm going to make that nice and subtle so we get that worn-in feel and crackling, but it's not overpowering the design. Now, just some final adjustments. And here is my final version of this skyline design by Frank Visuals. What do you think? Here is the before, and here is the after. I think this version would fit really nice on a t-shirt. The original design had really solid elements, really well done by Frank Visuals. I wanted to keep that same vibe and palette, but just add a little more depth and atmosphere through a rearranging of the composition. I think especially for a car-centered design like this, it's really important to maximize that sense of movement by playing with angles and light and shadow. I love what we came up with here. Again, here is the before, and here is the after. Did I make it, or did I break it? Let me know. Let's move on to the second design sent in by Epic Shadow 00. Let's go. If you're a regular here, you know how much I love Western-inspired designs. I think the last critique video even had a Western-like design. So obviously, I had to run it back. Really excited about this one. I'm a huge fan of the composition and the colors here. The layout and everything is really nice. It's really well done. It's got a super tasteful, vintage looking grain effect, just really solid all around. I do think the layout can be spaced out a bit more as it feels sort of cramped. Even with this cowgirl's head here, it's really blocking, the text behind it. And we want this, this is the main text. We want that to be the most legible it can be. I'm a big fan of when the subject overlaps onto the text, but in this case, it's just overlapping a little too much to where, you're missing an entire letter here. There's also some abrupt or unnatural features that make this feel a little less polished. For example, the unnatural finish or the fade out on the fence here. It's got a really harsh cutoff here, and it's kind of got a funky shape to it. And then on the other side, it's got this smooth fade out, which I would like, except it doesn't really match the sort of aesthetic of the design. It's got a soft, transparency, fade there. Meanwhile, the rest of the design has this really grainy, dithered look to it. So I would probably swap this out for, a grainy fade and make that more symmetrical on this side as well. The rope also has inconsistent color and thickness. It kind of just looks a little odd at some points around the graphic here where the rope just tapers off. The supporting type is also placed a little jarringly. It's also kind of floating in the middle of nowhere. There's really nothing to bound it or frame it. I would also make the colors just a little bit more punchy with a more unified palette. For example, I think the color of this big text here should not be pink. It's sort of an odd man out in the general palette of this. And I think you're missing out on the opportunity for a really solid accent color here to tie everything together, which should be this pungent red that's on this cowgirl's lips and her tie. This part of the design uses that color really nicely, and I think it'd bring everything together if the big text up here used that color as well. The yellow on the boots and her hair here is also gorgeous, great color selection. But again, I think there's some missed opportunity here to add this color in some other places. For example, the fringe of her skirt or on the rope here. And I think that'll tie the color palette in a lot better. I also think it'd be a really sweet cherry on top to add some dimension to this via some sort of background like a baby blue sky or something, just something behind her to add some depth and give a sense of dimensional space. I like that you added this cactus back here, which helps with that, but I think something like a sky or even some sort of sand element down here would really help as well. Overall, this design is great as is, but I think we could push it just a little further. So let's give it a shot. First thing I'm doing is simplifying the main type. I think the layer style here is just too overpowering and it doesn't sit well visually with the design language of the rest of the graphic. I'm going to make that red to tie that in with the nice accented color on the cowgirl's lips and tie here. And I also want to make it more legible by moving it up so her head isn't obscuring the letters so much. And I'm going to make the supporting type red as well and rearrange it so that it looks less like it's floating in empty space. A little bit of personal preference here, but I did want to change the font to a more Western vibe. So this font is called Nandaka Western, something like that. I don't know how to pronounce it. Now, amidst working on this, I realized I'm not a huge fan of how the layers were set up and how the coloring was done. For example, the threshold effect is baked onto the lady and the image here. The coloring is hard to deal with too, since it's sort of dependent on the threshold of the image. You know, imagine I want to change the grain effect a bit or lighten it up. I'd kind of have to redo everything. And again, this is more personal preference, but I like to set up my design in a more modular way. That way it's way easier to go back and change things. With this design style in specific, it's perfect for something like my VINTONE Photoshop template, which is pretty much made to streamline designs exactly like this. If you're unfamiliar, it basically allows you to get a live Xerox or halftone look on your design while you composite it, and then you're able to color it in like a coloring book. If you want, feel free to check out my other videos on VINTONE. But I'm going to transfer this design to VINTONE just to make this process easier for me. We're going to use the original image here, and the template is going to automate that grainy Xerox effect, but the original image is kept intact, which is exactly what I want. So I can make adjustments to the brightness and whatnot on the fly. So I'm gonna grab a better selection of this, and I wanna make sure the rope looks neat and the fence cutoff isn't too funky. And then I'm just gonna make the fence wider, especially on this right side to even out the spacing in the composition. Otherwise, let's get straight to coloring this. Like I mentioned, in VINTONE, you kind of color things like a coloring book, except in Photoshop, we have layer masks. So it's a lot easier to color inside the lines. And the nice thing about this is the color in this template is dithered. So we get that grainy effect here as well. I'm pretty much replicating a lot of what Epic Shadow did originally for the colors, but this way it's a lot more modular if I wanted to adjust things on the fly. The main thing I'm doing differently right now is making that yellow accent more prominent, and I'm going to tie in that red accent later with the text to make everything more cohesive. And I'm also coloring in this rope with a more steady hand, so the final product just looks more polished. In a more minimalist design like this, getting the details right is very important. I'm also fading the color of the fence out quite a bit for that eased fade at the edges of the design versus a harsh cutoff. Now I want to do something pretty minor, but I feel like it's really going to help push this design forward. And that is adding a sky/background. Like I said before, adding a sense of depth and dimension is extremely important because you want to give the viewer not only full context of what's going on and where our subject is relative to three-dimensional space, but also that sense of atmosphere and that feeling that they can sort of step into the design. Finally, I'll throw back in that red text on top and the supporting type. And after some final adjustments, here is my final version of this Wild West design by Epic Shadow 00. I absolutely love this one. Here is the before and here is the after. Also a nice fit for a t-shirt. This was a really fun and interesting one because I kept pretty much every single element from the original intact, And I didn't really change much about the composition either. With that being said, I feel like we were still able to get a lot more out of this design and just really polish it up. And I think that shows you just how important the tiny details can be and how small decisions can make big changes. I thought it was really important to bring together the coloring on this one. It felt like it was almost there, and just by adding some accents on the skirt, the rope, and of course matching that red accent to the text, for me it just makes a huge difference in the cohesiveness of the visual language and the balance of this design. Color is so important, especially when you've got only a few in your palette, just like this design does. I also think adjusting the left and right spacing by fixing that fence really helped balance out the weighting of this graphic, as well as adding that sky in the background for a better feel of atmosphere, and also again that really nice contrast between warm and cool colors. I think that adds some subtle complexity that just ties everything together. Again, here is the before and here is the after. What do you think? Thank you so much for watching. I love doing this series. It's always a fun time. If you enjoyed it too, be sure to let me know by liking this video and commenting down below. And you also may want to subscribe to the channel because I don't know. Also follow my Instagram at Duran Studio and keep an eye out for my stories. That's where I post the submission links for these critiques. And that's all I got. Peace and love. I'm gonna miss y'all. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.